I was reviewing the final layouts for my New York office expansion when my phone started buzzing across the glass desk, soft, persistent, like it was insisting on being noticed. I smoothed the front of my cream silk blouse, still warm from the morning sun spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and glanced at the screen. It was my cousin Emily, which was strange. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered anyway. "Hey, everything okay?" Her voice came through in a hesitant whisper. Did your dad really not tell you?" A slow, familiar tightness curled in my chest. "Tell me what?" There was a pause, long enough that I could hear her exhale. "The reunion. He said you weren't coming." My fingers froze over my keyboard. "What reunion?" "The family reunion. At your dad's house. Everyone's going. It's kind of a big deal this year." I swallowed hard, the room suddenly too still. "I wasn't invited." Emily muttered something under her breath. Anger, surprise, guilt, all tangled together. "He told everyone you were busy with your work stuff." But I overheard him say, "It's just a reunion. She doesn't need to be there. Just a reunion. Just the one party I'd built my entire life to finally deserve a place at." I leaned back in my chair, the city humming below me, and let out a short breath that felt more like a laugh. Sharp, ironic, a little wounded. "Of course," I murmured. Because somehow, even now, my success was still the secret they preferred to pretend didn't exist. I was 19 the last time I stood in my father's living room, the air thick with the smell of his aftershave and the tension that always seemed to settle between us. Back then, I was the girl who tried too hard, too eager to please, too desperate to be seen, too quick to shrink when someone raised their voice. He sat at the head of the dining table, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Avery," he said, my name sharp as glass, "you need to stop chasing these silly dreams. Graphic design? Art school? No one makes a living out of that." I remember my hands trembling as I clutched the brochure from the Rhode Island School of Design. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry. "Dad, I got in. On partial scholarship. It's everything I've worked for." He scoffed. "And who's supposed to pay the rest? Your fantasy isn't my responsibility." Mom stood near the counter, wringing a dish towel, too afraid to pick a side, though silence, I later learned, is its own kind of choice. "I can work," I insisted. "I'll figure it out. I just need your support." His voice rose, loud enough to make my heartbeat skip. "Support? You're already a burden. Stop making things harder." The words hit harder than any slap could have. Something inside me cracked, quietly, painfully, finally. I turned away before he could see the tears gathering in my eyes. But my grandmother June saw them. She'd arrived earlier with a tin of lemon cookies and that gentle, knowing smile of hers. She came to my side and pressed something into my hand, a small silver locket shaped like a teardrop. "It belonged to your mother when she was braver," she whispered. "When she believed she could become the woman she wanted to be." Inside was a tiny folded note, written in her soft script. "Go where you're valued." I inhaled shakily, the weight of the locket grounding me. Grandma squeezed my fingers. "You don't owe anyone permission to chase what's yours." That was the moment the shaking in my hand stopped. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I realized staying would hurt more than leaving. I walked out with nothing but a backpack, the locket, and acceptance papers to a dream no one in that house believed in.
Dad didn't stop me.
Mom didn't follow. The door clicked behind me. Not slammed, not forced, just a quiet ending to a version of myself that had already begun to fade. I arrived in Providence with 2 suitcases, $312 in my checking account, and a determination so raw it practically hummed beneath my skin. RISD felt like stepping into another universe, corridors lined with sketches, studios buzzing with ideas, the scent of paint and ambition everywhere. For the first time, no one looked at me like I was asking for too much just by wanting more. But wanting more didn't pay rent. My first job was wiping down tables at a cafe near campus. The second was tutoring freshmen in digital basics. The third, my favorite, was assisting in the design lab long after everyone else had packed up. I worked until my fingers cramped until my eyes burned from staring at screens, until self-doubt whispered that I wasn't cut out for this. And then I worked a little more. Still, there were nights I lay in my tiny attic room, staring at the sloped ceiling, wondering if Dad had been right. That maybe dreams were just softer words for foolishness. Then I met her. Professor Laura Chambers, sharp bob, sharp mind, sharper instincts. She was the kind of woman who could spot talent the way some people smell rain. One evening, while I was cleaning up leftover portfolios from second-year critiques, she stopped beside my workstation. "You designed these mock brand boards?" she asked, tapping the corner of my assignment. I swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. They're rough, just drafts." "They're brilliant," she said simply. "You think in shapes the way musicians think in rhythm." I don't think anyone had ever complimented me like that before. Compliments at home were currency, rare, conditional, transactional. This felt like oxygen. She recommended me for a small internship at a women-run creative agency downtown. It didn't pay much, but it gave me access to real clients, real deadlines, real pressure. The first time they trusted me to design a logo for a boutique bakery, I almost cried from both excitement and terror. When the bakery owner hugged me after seeing the final design, her eyes shiny, her voice cracking as she said, "You made my dream look real," I felt something shift inside. It was the first small win that didn't just validate me, it rebuilt me. More clients followed, small businesses, online shops, local nonprofits, each one a stepping stone to something bigger. By the time I graduated, I had a portfolio thick enough to slam on a table and an invitation from Professor Chambers to join her private consulting firm in New York. I took the train to the city with that same silver locket around my neck, the words "Go where you're valued" resting against my skin like a quiet promise. New York was brutal at first, loud, relentless, competitive, but I found rhythm in the chaos. I learned to pitch with confidence, negotiate with strength, and design with intention. I worked with Chambers for 3 years before she pulled me aside one winter morning and said, "Avery, it's time. Start your own agency. You're ready." I wasn't.
But I did it anyway.
And slowly, piece by piece, late night by late night, contract by contract, I built something real. Something big. Something that looked nothing like the failure the people back home expected me to become. I posted only the safe updates online, busy with work, in the city, doing fine, carefully avoiding anything that would reveal the truth. That the girl they dismissed had silently become the woman running one of Manhattan's fastest-growing branding firms. The day they showed up was a Thursday, the kind of crisp Manhattan morning where the sky looks polished and the air tastes faintly like roasted coffee from the carts lining the street. I was in my office overlooking Madison Avenue, reviewing the final pitch deck for a luxury fashion house, when my assistant, Grace, knocked lightly. "Avery, you have visitors." I frowned. "Clients? They don't have an appointment." Grace hesitated. "They said they're family." My heartbeat stilled. Family? No one from home had ever stepped foot in New York for me. "Who?" I asked, already knowing. "Your father. And your mother. And a few others." Her voice dipped. Should I send them away? I could have. I probably should have. But something in me, pride, curiosity, maybe closure, lifted its chin.
No.
Send them to the main conference room. Grace nodded and disappeared. I stayed still for a moment, smoothing down my blazer, steadying my breath. The locket rested beneath the collar of my blouse, warm against my skin. Go where you're valued. Well, this was my place. My world. My value. Whether they liked it or not. When I walked into the glass-walled conference room, they were already inside, standing stiff, overwhelmed, small against the sheer scale of everything. Dad turned first. He looked older, grayer, but the same stubborn set to his jaw. Mom looked nervous, twisting the strap of her purse the way she used to twist dish towels. My aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins hovered near the massive polished table, whispering as they took in the view of the skyline. "Hi," I said simply. Mom forced a smile. Dad didn't. My aunt, always the bold one, jumped in. "Avery, sweetheart, we were in town for the reunion. Your dad told us you moved here for small projects. We had no idea you worked somewhere like this. Somewhere. Like this. I bit back a laugh. Dad cleared his throat. This is quite the place. You didn't mention you work for a big firm. My cousins glanced around, eyes wide at the curated art on the walls, the custom brass light fixtures, the rows of awards displayed on recessed shelves. I don't work for anyone, I said.
Calm.
Controlled. This is my firm. It was almost funny, the way silence hit the room like a dropped weight. Dad blinked. Your firm? Yes. I slid a presentation remote across the table. Chambers and Hart Creative. I'm Hart. My uncle stepped closer to an award. This says your company led the brand redesign for... Wait, this is a global corporation. Several. I corrected gently. My cousins exchanged looks, stunned. My mother's eyes glistened, but not with pride, more with disbelief. The kind that says, I don't understand this daughter I raised. Dad's reaction, however, was the sharpest. His face tightened, pride wrestling with embarrassment, with the realization that the daughter he once called a burden now outranked every expectation he had ever set. So, you're successful, he managed, voice stiff. Very successful. I folded my hands. Yes. And you didn't tell us? My mother whispered. I looked at her, really looked, at the woman who had watched me walk out at 19 and never crossed the threshold after me. You never asked, I said softly. And I didn't want to spend years proving myself to people who had already decided I wasn't worth believing in. Her face crumpled. Dad's hardened. Well, he said, trying to sound authoritative, this reunion was supposed to bring the family together. Maybe this is good timing. Maybe we can all reconnect now. I raised an eyebrow. Reconnect? After I wasn't even invited? He shifted. I didn't think you'd want to come. You're busy. And these things aren't that important. Not important. The one gathering I'd spent half my childhood hoping to be included in. The place where everyone else got to belong except me. I stepped aside, letting them take in the room again. The custom design boards, the framed features in Forbes and Business Insider, the elegant cream sofa, the clean scent of eucalyptus diffusers I chose myself. This was my life now. My success. My story. And for the first time, I wasn't hiding any of it. Dad was the first to speak again, shifting uncomfortably in one of the leather conference chairs. He wasn't used to sitting lower than me, literally or figuratively. Avery, he said, clearing his throat, maybe we can start over. As a family. Things were said in the past, but we can move beyond that. I walked slowly to the head of the table, my seat, and rested my fingertips on the cool surface. His eyes followed the gesture, as if realizing for the first time that this room, this company, this entire floor answered to me. Start over? I echoed. I'm not against that. But if we're rebuilding, it has to be on new terms. My mother looked up, hopeful, almost fragile. What terms, sweetheart? I inhaled, steady and calm. Honesty. Respect. Accountability. Confusion flickered across my father's face. Aunt Linda, though, nodded as if she understood more than she let on. I turned to Dad first. You spent years telling me my dreams were foolish, that I was a burden. If you want to be part of my life now, then you have to acknowledge that. Out loud. Not as an excuse, but as recognition. His jaw flexed. Apologizing was foreign territory for him. I may have been harsh, he said tightly. Harsh is when you critique someone's choices, I said softly. You dismissed me. Silence stretched. My cousins glanced at each other, unsure. Mom wiped beneath her eyes. Finally, Dad exhaled, shoulders dropping.
Fine.
I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. I turned to Mom. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Your condition is different, I told her gently. You don't need to apologize for words you never said. But you do need to stop staying silent when it matters. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be an active one. Her voice cracked. I can try. I want to try. I believed her. Maybe because she sounded like the version of herself Grandma always hinted was still buried under years of keeping the peace. Then I looked at Aunt Linda, who'd always meddled, always gossiped. "You want my help with your small boutique branding?" "I'll consider it," I said. "But only if you agree to stop tearing people down behind their backs. It's toxic, and it's hurtful even when you think no one hears it." She flushed, then nodded. "You're right. I can do better." My cousins straightened when I faced them. "You two are talented," I said. "But you keep settling for what's easy. If you want mentorship from me, real mentorship, you'll each pick one goal you've been too scared to chase. And you'll go after it. Fully." They exchanged excited glances. "Deal," they chimed. Finally, I returned my gaze to Dad. The room was quiet, still waiting. "And one more thing," I said, level and clear. "You don't get to downplay my accomplishments anymore. Not to me. Not to the family. Not to yourself. If we move forward, it's with respect, not dismissal." His nod was slow, reluctant, but genuine. "I understand." For the first time in my life, I felt the power shift, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I wasn't the girl begging to be seen anymore. I was the woman setting the terms. And they were listening. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. They changed. Not perfectly, not instantly, but noticeably. Dad called first. Not to lecture, not to pry, but to ask, genuinely ask, how a major pitch went. His voice was awkward at first, like he was learning a new language. Respect.
Curiosity.
Humility. But he kept trying, and with each call, the old sharpness softened into something I'd never heard from him before. Effort. Mom began texting me pictures of little things that reminded her of me. Sunsets, art pieces, coffee mugs she thought I'd like. She actually started therapy, something I never imagined she'd do. "I'm learning how not to disappear when things get hard," she said one evening. "I want to show up for you, and for myself." My aunt's boutique launched a new branding campaign. Clean, refined, modern. She didn't ask me to do the work. She hired a small local designer and proudly sent me photos. "Supporting new talent," she wrote. It was the most genuine message she'd ever sent. My cousin sent voice notes, excited, breathless, updating me on the goals they'd chosen. One enrolled in a competitive film program. The other started an online business she'd been terrified to launch. They weren't doing it for me. They were doing it because, maybe for the first time, they believed they could. And as all of them shifted, I did too. The anger I'd carried for years, quiet, heavy, tucked behind my ribs, finally began to loosen. One Sunday morning, while cleaning my apartment, I found the silver locket again. The one Grandma June had given me the night everything changed. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding it carefully, tracing the curve of the metal. It had tiny scratches now, softened edges from years of use, much like me. I opened it, unfolding the small, worn note inside. "Go where you're valued." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. I had done exactly that. I'd built a life where I was valued not because someone granted me space, but because I carved it myself. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Later that afternoon, as I stood by the window overlooking the city, Dad called again. His voice was gentle, unsure. "We're planning another family gathering," he said. "Smaller this time. More meaningful. And, Avery, I want you there. If you'd like to be." I glanced at the skyline, strong, steady mine. "I'll come," I said, not because I needed to belong, but because I already did, within myself. As I hung up, I closed my hand around the locket and whispered the final truth of my journey, the one I knew I'd carry forward. Bottom of form.